Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good morning, Rush Nation. It is another day of fantasy football to talk about. Lots and lots and lots and lots to get into. So today we're going to pivot a little bit slightly and look at a few different things. I want to wrap up. I want to do one more sort of bit of piece on the Scott Fish Bowl. It's kind of what the theme of the week has been, I suppose, to a certain extent. And then I'm going to break into the JTT Cup today. So JTT Cup is a fantasy competition that was started by my good friend Matt Cullen. He started it, I think, 4 years ago now, which is, and it's grown from strength to strength. I think he's raised close to £15,000 this year, which is nothing short of remarkable. And so it's a great tournament. It's got over 600 people in it. It's a best ball tournament, so the strategy is very, very different. So we're going to break into some of my projections and thoughts and feelings and bits and pieces on that as well. So lots to get on with today. I'll start with the Scott Fish Bowl stuff I want to go through. We've got a bit more ADP data, which is great. So I'm going to quickly just ping that up now and just go through those of you in the slow drafts or those of you with the live drafts in all different stages. So I want to make sure that we are going through sort of the ADP. You can see here now most people have completed round 1. Most have completed round 2. So we don't need to really review that. That ADP is what it is. Interesting to see someone like Jordan Love sneak into round 2. He's one of the big movers from yesterday's data in particular. We see Trey McBride has fallen into round 3. Dalton Kincaid is now at the tight end 5, which again, I think he was there yesterday, so that stayed relatively consistent. Travis Etienne was missing off of yesterday's data. There was a few players that were missing, but he's now back in here. So we're now really going to concentrate on where the numbers are sort of in the hundreds. So these sort of round 4, 5 picks and beyond that. So to get people ready for the day here. So this is round 4 here. So round 4 has some pretty chalky picks here. Got a lot of QBs going very high here. 15 is going at 41, which is not reflective in a lot of the drafts I've seen and people sharing, but that just seems to be something that has occurred according to this ADP. So it's interesting to see these QBs going in the top 17 in the first 4 rounds. To give you some context, I took Deshaun Watson as the QB 21 in the draft at the 7-9. So it says there's going to be a big variance here coming up soon in terms of QBs and QBs rushing off the board. I would say that a lot of these are waiting, and I would say a lot of these you can wait on as well. Quite significantly, the tight ends have shoved up the board. You've got 8 in the top 49 picks. Again, I don't think that's reflective of everybody's drafts from what I've seen, but it's obviously this is the ADP data, so this is the overall. So if you're in those drafts where tight ends have gone a little bit later, and I think there are definitely some instances where they have, then you can definitely take advantage of that here. But the one thing I think to call out here is there's 12 running backs here in the top 48 picks. So running back is the position that is being faded. People are prioritizing those quarterbacks and tight ends. Even wide receivers, again, 12 wide receivers in the top 48 picks. And so what you're going to see in the data I'm about to show you, and I haven't reviewed this beforehand, and perhaps I should have done, is you're going to see big wide receiver runs. And that's what I've been seeing in drafts, quite reflective in rounds 5 and 6. And what this means is that I personally think that, and I'm not a big load up on wide receiver early, but I took 3 in my first 5 picks, and I feel pretty good about doing that. And it means now then everybody's chasing and getting those wide receivers on the fringes of scarcity. Kenneth Walker was another player who was missing off the ADP yesterday, by the way. I think it's interesting because I think because of those runs, you can actually scoop up the running back value and the tight end value elsewhere. I wouldn't be plucking into reaching for a tight end. You've got players like Njoku who are slightly higher up on my board here at pick 61, for example. But you're going to see here big wide receiver runs. So you got this big run here of 5 out of 6 picks, and then you've got a couple of picks here, and then you've got another run of 2, 3, 4 in the next 6 picks. So we're seeing a lot of these wide receivers come off the board here between picks 51. Let me get this notice because it's shrinking. Yeah, so we're seeing big runs here on the running back position, or the wide receiver position, and we're not seeing big ones on the running back position. Again, look, running back 18 is going at pick 75. And so here, if you've picked 3 wide receivers in the first 5 picks here, and you've got those sort of elite stud wide receivers here, you're in a really good spot to just pick off some of this value, like Joe Mixon here. Pick 57, I think, is exceptional value here that you can get. David Njoku here is exceptional value. Kenneth Walker Jr., good value here. Alvin Kamara is exceptional value here at pick 68. Draft I was in, he went well before that. I think it's really exceptional value if you're getting him anywhere in a pick that begins with a 6. Even a pick beginning with a 5, I think that's exceptional value. I think he's a real outlier here in the ADP. Here's Deshaun Watson at QB20, which with some rushing ability. I don't understand the players that are going above him, Stafford, Cousins, they don't have that rushing playmaking ability, which is rewarded in the scoring. So I think that you're sleeping on him there, and I think you can sleep on that QB2 until you get to this range of Watson. So it's a good idea to potentially do that and really flood with wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. And there's some great value running backs here. So you've got plenty of options here to attack the running back position. But because of this big wide receiver run, so if you go 3 wide receivers in your opening 5 or 6 picks, you've then got this opportunity to really pick up these pockets, and this is where you're seeing this deviation in the ADP. But most people are going wide receiver here, which is interesting. So you've got this big wide receiver run, and then you're going to see here around about pick 80 this big RB run, which is huge. James Conner is good value here. Zamir White, good value here. Swift, good value here. I'm fading Harris in all formats. But you've got this big run here of running backs. So we're seeing big wide receiver run, then a big running back run. So that's just something to keep an eye on. If you can get yourself in a position where you can pivot away from this. So take advantage of the running backs here and then fill up in other positions, or maybe take some wide receivers here, but there's not many going off the board. That's the value suggesting that to you. So something to consider as part of your builds there. As always, I'll show my team. Just find it here. It's such a big list now. I remember playing in the earlier Scott Fish Bowls and didn't take half as long to find this. So again, it's everything I've kind of again, everything I'm talking about here is the strategy I've put together. And again, if you've got a different strategy, that's great. At least you can use this as a benchmark of what other people or myself are doing. But this is the strategy I feel comfortable with the scoring and with the opportunities. And I always like to zig where everybody is zagging. It's not letting me pull it up. Effectively, my team is not different from yesterday. I made 3 picks. Deebo Samuel in the 5th round. Raheed Shaheed I took at the 6.04. I didn't believe he'd come back to me at the 7.09. I just want to go with that value of kick returner and something a bit different. And then I've taken Deshaun Watson at the 7.09. So I'm 11 in my pick, in my draft. So that gives you a bit of an idea of who we've got. And sort of the roster builds there. So you've got an idea of the strategy. Let's dive into the JTT Cup. So as I talked about the JTT Cup, amazing competition by Matt. And this is his 4th year of doing it. I'm going to be brutally honest and upfront and say that I've never made the playoffs in this format. So it's not, you take all my advice, I suppose, with a pinch of salt, but I do want to give people that that caveat ahead of time. I probably would say that I'm not the best ball player. I have moments where I peak. I've done quite well in some tournaments where I've really chased variance. But at the same token, this is a particular competition I've not done really well. I was doing really well last year and then lost all my QBs. So I feel like the build was right, just a bit unlucky there with QBs. And that's true of a few tournaments where I've not done as well in, where I've got the rest of it right, but the QBs have got injured. That's part and parcel of the game, unfortunately. But, do follow at JTT Cup. If you haven't got in this year, then definitely sign up next year. It's a phenomenal tournament for a phenomenal cause. And Matt has recently, for all his good work, I think he's raised £32,000. Has recently been asked to be a trustee of the charity, which is just incredible. And it's a life-changing amount of money for that organization. So it's really a great charity. It's a great competition. Some of the scoring quirks are similar to Scottish Bowl. The return yards are in here. It's 5 points per TD. There's some points for first downs. The receiving is a bit different. So it does elevate running backs a small amount, but not loads. And you'll see that here in my sort of projections on screen here. And this is one I suggest if you're listening to this on the podcast version, I'll do my best to narrate it. But yeah, I definitely think you should concentrate on that. I'm just going to zoom in my screen so that it can be a bit better on the screen. So let's see, that should be a bit easier. You're not going to see quite as much in one go, but that should give you a good overview. So these are projections that I've taken from my projection model, and I've put in a few different models. There's a few quirky bonuses in here for 50-yard plays and 100-yard, 200-yard rushing games, passing games for like 400-yard passing games, etc. I don't have those factored into these numbers. Pure and simple, they're a little bit random. It's really hard. It's really hard to sort of get there. I'm trying to think of the best way to explain. It's really hard to sort of guess those and get a good projection number on those sort of plays. There's such wide variance every year. There's a lot of factors that go into that. So these numbers don't have that. There'll be a bit of play where you might get those bonuses, and I would treat them as such. They're not things you can really project with any level of confidence. So I would just, I don't really, is the sheer answer of it. So let's look at the total projections here. I've only covered sort of the top 150 odd players or so, and then the Raiders quarterback situation. So you can see here it's very similar to like the Scottish Bowl projections here in terms of the QBs. CD Lamb, Tyreek Hill. So again, the points, because the scoring is relatively similar, you can see here that it does transcend to be quite similar. So if you've played in the Scottish Bowl and then you're coming over to the JTT, you should feel pretty comfy with some of these numbers and the positions rankings of these players from a projection standpoint. You see, I probably have Mahomes a little bit lower. I think you're buying a floor with him as opposed to buying a ceiling. But the things that you have to consider in here, you see there's some players that be out of whack because I have them overvalued over the consensus, and there's players like Deebo Samuel here. And there's a few others in here as we go through. Michael Pittman, for example. Now, I kind of talked about them on shows this week, so I'm not going to go too much into why I have certain players higher than others on the show. If you want to get into that, you can certainly ask me. You can definitely get in contact with me at 5 Yard Rush, or the other means. If you have other means of getting hold of me, then I'm absolutely happy to sort of go into some of this as to why. The strategy here with Best Ball, and I'm sure most of you that are listening to this follow Tom Strachan. He's kind of like the guru of Best Ball. He's the guy I would go to when I'm picking and listening to Best Ball strategy. There's the idea of stacking. Is the idea of potentially in this sort of play, a hero RB build. It is a super flex competition. It's also 28 rounds. So tomorrow when we look at some other tournaments, I'm going to recap the JTT and look at steals, players that I think are going to be worth looking at in the later rounds. I don't have any ADP for this. So there isn't any. There's no real projections or mocks or anything like that other than the projections I've done. So it's really hard to tell you like what rounds these stills are going to be. You're going to get a lot of people in this format stack, and I think it's a viable strategy. It absolutely is, especially in these monster tournaments. The problem with that is I think people reach for stacks, and people are desperate for stacks. It's almost become so cool to stack. I almost want to go the opposite way. I don't like to do what everybody else does. I feel like, and again, this is me posing a strategy. It might be why I don't do particularly well in these tournaments. I don't like to follow the consensus. I think if you follow the consensus, you're getting into a position where you're just going to build like everybody else, and then it becomes a semi-luck tournament slash where's your separation? What are you going to do to help you get to win the tournament? Whereas I think at least if you build in a contrarian where you do things that are a bit different, you end up with more, I would say more of a chance. I think you end up with more of a chance because I think there's less people doing what you do. And if those picks work out for you, you end up with this ability to be different and therefore propel yourself up boards. So the theory behind stacking is that you take 2 or 3 or 4 players of the same team. There's definitely some stacks here that are highly attractive. The Colts stack in particular is one that you want to get a big piece of. Pieces of the Dallas stack, pieces of the Chiefs stack, pieces of the Ravens stack. There's lots of different pieces of stacks you want to get, but I think, because so many people will do that and so many people will reach up, I'm not sure I'm paying elevated prices to make stacks. And the theory behind it is that you get all the points from that offense. So if you're projecting that offense to be exceptionally good and you've got the pieces of that offense, then you're in a really good spot. And that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. But things like the Colt stack, for example, is going to be very, very hard to pull off. You might get 2 pieces of that, but you're not going to get Taylor, Richardson, and Pittman in this sort of format. So I think there's that consideration. For me, probably, if there's an opportunity to stack at a good value and a good price, I would definitely look to doing it. But for me, I'm probably in these sorts of tournaments, I'm looking for high variance. I'm looking at these projections are good sort of base numbers, but I'm looking at people that can exceed these numbers and opportunities to exceed. So I'm thinking more about the types of offense that I'm wanting to target, where there isn't those crowded spaces and opportunities for people that can just absolutely shine and smash ADP. So again, this is where I'm looking at people like Pittman, like Deebo Samuel in particular. If you notice here, I've got the scoring of the running backs here are slightly lower than the wide receiver scoring. I think the wide receiver scoring is more advantageous, although, these running backs are scoring very, very good points at the top end. So you've got a hidden gem here in Jane Daniels. Really, the story's out. If you've been playing for it, you've got a big run of running backs here, only split by Shaheed because of his returning yards, because that's in here. So I think really in terms of this format, I'm looking to just get best players available. I'm taking this projection sheet. What I'll do is I'll actually put this onto the show notes, and you can click through and just sort of look at this and have reference to this. I don't mind this one being particularly open. I caveat it with its projections models. So I'm not projecting these to, for me, this is just how I think the offense is going to run, but we haven't had any preseason. We haven't had any games. So there's some elements of this where we don't have all the information, and it's just an educated guess based on what we've seen and what I think will happen. So there always comes that caveat that I read situations right, I read situations wrong. You might look at these and completely disagree, and that's absolutely fine. And I think it's good to have a lot of opinions and drive these in. So I think, I'm happy to share this data and look through this. It's a 28-round tournament, so it's quite a lot of rounds. It's a lot of these are mostly slow drafts, so you're going to have a lot of these drafts that will take probably a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. The slowest ones will probably take close to a month. You will have time to think about these picks. If I'm looking at the scoring and I'm looking at sort of roster construction, I'm thinking you're probably going to need to go historically, given I tend to find in these tournaments, UK players will tend to take QBs earlier and American players will tend to take QBs later. That's typically how I find Superflex leagues. That's an overgeneralization. It does depend on format and things like that. But I do think in this, if you're in a league of predominantly UK players, I think you'll see big runs of quarterbacks going early. Excuse me. And that means I think if you are thinking about your Superflex build, I think you need to get to the point of taking a QB early. And then I think you can probably wait on that QB2 a little bit, but you're probably going to have to get him a bit earlier than what you get in the Scottish Bowl. So, I took a QB2 in round 7. A lot of people took him in sort of round 6. Some took him obviously much earlier, as we've seen on the ADP earlier. I think you're going to have to go on the upper end. I think some people are probably going to be taking them in 1 and 3, 1 and 2. I think you're going to see a lot of that. So I think you're going to have to take your QB2. I think you're going to have to draw a line of where's the last QB2 you want to take. And then I think that's going to elevate the QB3s up. So I'd be surprised if your build doesn't have 3 QBs in the first 8 picks if you're in a predominantly British player league. I think if you're in a American league mostly, and this is where I'm really sort of try and get to chats and understand who I'm drafting with and get as much information I can here. So I'm asking about their favorite teams. I'm asking about, trying to get information on them. So I can just get a hint on sort of players that they like. If I know they're a Bills fan, I know they're going to rate Bills players highly. It's not always the case, right? But you're just building a picture of ideas of where you might need to take players. So I always like to get chatty in chats. If you've ever been in a draft with me and you're kind of wondering why I ask these questions, there's 2 points. One is I'm very friendly. I like to just get to know people. I like to make friends. And that's me. But 2 is information. And I'll volunteer information myself. I think you give a bit of information to get some back. I don't have a problem with that. I don't lie. I'm very honest with what I say. There's nothing I say that's completely untrue. And I'm all right giving a bit of information to get some back. If I give out the fact that I'm a fan of a team, which isn't that hard to work out if you're on my social media profile anyway, you can, and I get the information back of everybody else. That's fine. And I can build my picture a little bit easier. So, I think it's good to get chatting. The more you chat, get an idea of location, where they're from, how they got into supporting the NFL. Fantasy history, all these sorts of things are really good pieces of information to give you an idea of where you kind of sit. There's a good phraseology. I think I've said this on the pod recently that if, and it comes from poker, that if you don't know who the fish is, you're the fish. So I think you've got to identify who that person is quite quickly as well. And I'm not saying I'm always a shark, by the way, but I think it's just a good thing to try and work out your position. So it's a deep draft, it's a late draft. You're going to have to take QB2, QB3 probably earlier than you would, just given the amount of UK players that will be in this tournament. It's a UK-based tournament, so you're going to see a lot of UK players, and therefore I think you're going to see QBs just rise probably a bit higher than you would, like, say, in the Scottish Bowl. And I think that's the first thing. I think RBs will be faded, so I think you can get some really good value on RBs later. So I'd be looking to stack this with, if I can go hero RB, hero tight end, 2 quarterbacks with lots of wide receivers, and then fill back in the later rounds. Sort of, when I say later rounds, sort of the 6 to 10 round, and fill it with RBs. Then that's kind of the ideal roster construction. And then later on, I'm just taking shots of players that can achieve. I'm taking the players who are potentially an injury away from getting a massive role and trying to and play a sort of luck game there. I think that's the positions. If you land those positions, you're going to be in a good spot. So I'll share this projection link so that you've got it. It should help you out a little bit with thinking about what you're going to do this Sunday. So it's a really, really interesting draft. There's, again, a caveat, not done particularly well in it. But yeah, it only takes one to get right and you're there. So thanks to Matt for hosting and doing a phenomenal job with this tournament. It's a great tournament. I love it every year. It's great with the updates and all the other commissions that help him out with that. It's absolutely brilliant. So I really wanted to get this one out there today and get people excited for that draft on Sunday. And we'll do Warrior Bowl and Battle of the Sexes as well. Previews for the rest of the week, so you're up to date on all these charity drafts that will be going on, and I'll sprinkle in some Scottish Bowl knowledge, some JTT Cup. I'll be highlighting tomorrow some late round picks that you can shoot for and get those ready for you. But thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this new show. I'm enjoying doing them. I hope you subscribe to the YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything, so please do subscribe. It really helps us out massively with reach, and also potentially getting to a stage where we can start making some money on this channel as well. So thank you so much as always, and enjoy your Wednesday. Don't forget, as always, keep rushing.